They've got this raised triangular piece that is actually so unnecessary, but it's stunning. Physical media is elite, even if it takes longer. And that extra layer of context makes the Ozdust ballroom scene even more painful. Hi, welcome back to my channel. I'm Nabila. I love talking about fashion, sustainable fashion, and all things sewing. And I also love musicals. My husband and I traveled to the Arlington Museum of Art to see a small collection of the costumes from Wicked from the Oscar-nominated and Tony Award-winning designer Paul Tazewell. And today I just wanted to share my thoughts and the clips I got of the costumes up close. So in total we got to see 6 costumes and a handful of props, and that doesn't sound like a lot, especially considering there's so many wonderful costumes in the movie, but the exhibit was actually free. I really hope to see a bigger exhibit of a lot more costumes, especially after part 2 releases. But anyway, for this exhibit, let's get started with Glinda's bubble dress. This dress was so incredible to see up close. So the statistic that everyone's throwing out for this dress is that it took 225 hours of hand beating 20,000 beads onto this entire dress. So Paul Tazewell says that his team was inspired by the Fibonacci sequence to create this dress and bubbles. So you can see that the way that the skirt lays creates this spiral and this bubble shape. But I think it's also really interesting to think about how the pattern piece for this spiral shape is most likely a circle or bubble shaped. So the dress is made from silk organza, which is already a pretty structured fabric, but to get it to lift off of one another, they also used horsehair braid at the edges, which is commonly used in wedding dresses. And I didn't notice this until I was looking at it up close, but I really like how they didn't bring that horsehair braid all the way to the edge of the fabric. They left a little bit of the gap, so the edge of that fabric falls in a really soft and almost petal-like way. Another thing that's really interesting to me is this dress is probably really heavy and it's strapless. So when you have a strapless dress, especially one that's heavy, you need to think about all the internal infrastructure to hold this dress up on the body. So I could kind of tell from the behind the scenes footage that there are so many layers here. And so for the skirt portion, it attaches to a waistband and cinches in. And so there's a really good strong foundation there, especially, I don't know if they're using like a hoop skirt or something like that to create a base for all this fabric to lay against. So the bodice sits on top of a corset to really cinch everything in and make sure that that is not going to be falling down, especially with the weight of the beads. And I think this is really interesting because this dress looks so light and ethereal and flowy, but actually there's so much going on underneath the layers that help the dress have this structure and make sure everything is exactly in place. And I kind of feel like all this internal structure that's going on behind the scenes kind of reflects well the way that Glinda might be feeling in this scene when she's having to tell all the people in Munchkinland that everything is good, but actually she's mourning her best friend. I know there are some people that are upset that Paul Tazewell didn't go with the blue dress from the Wicked musical, but I understand that he's trying to reference the original Wizard of Oz Glinda dress. And that kind of makes sense. I'm sure that Susan Hilferty's first choice would have been to go with the pink, but she couldn't do that due to the licensing issues. And she was able to creatively pivot and make the pivot seem intentional. But yeah, if you have a strong opinion either way, let me know in the comments down below. I personally want to see how part 2 is gonna look before I say one way or another, because I'm sure that Paul Tazewell is picking certain colors for a reason. So yeah, I just want to see how that plays out before I really form an opinion on it. And then we have the Wiz-O-Mania narrator costume, and there's so much detail in this costume, and it's only seen for like a minute, and this isn't even one of the main characters. And one thing I like about how Paul Tazewell and his team designed these costumes is that details are repeated over and over again on different characters, and when they're repeated in different ways, they feel very cohesive, and yet each character has their own take on that specific detail. And I think that's really interesting. So for the Wiz-O-Mania narrator costume, you can see that he has this folded cravat, and it's intricately folded in such a way that is also repeated in the wizard's costume. Now the wizard's costume isn't in this exhibit, but I did notice that big cravat that the wizard has is just like almost like an eye, and this Wiz-O-Mania costume is almost like the smaller version of that. And then I believe that Elphaba also has like a folded cravat or maybe collar detail in the Dancing Through Life scene. So yeah, I just think it's really interesting when I can tell that the designer is playing with these shapes over and over again, but is still able to create something new every time. And then I really wanted to point out the cuffs on this Wiz-O-Mania costume are incredible. They've got this raised triangular piece that is actually so unnecessary, but it's stunning. I just kept thinking about how humans had to make all these little designs, and there's so much effort put into kind of this almost background character. The level of pattern making that it would have had to take to make this triangular cuff just kind of stresses me out a little bit, but I'm also kind of stunned. When I see details like this, I really feel like everyone on the set of Wicked was at their complete A game, and everyone was so inspired by seeing everyone else so locked in, and everyone came to do their best work. And I don't know, that just makes me really inspired. I really would have loved to see the almost meringue dancers that were behind the Wiz-O-Mania narrator. I want to know if this is a reference to the Wiz, which I know Paul Tazewell has designed the costumes of before. I haven't watched it yet, but if you know, let me know in the comments down below. And now for Fiyero's Ozdust ballroom costume. This costume is very equestrian and features tribal geometry embroidery. What's really interesting to me about this costume is that the team apparently knew that Jonathan Bailey runs really hot, and so they built this internal plumbing into his costumes so that ice water could be passed through it and cool him off. And I really wish we could see the internal structure of all that, because that sounds super interesting. And you actually can get no indication that all that is going on in the inside. And this might be a hot take, but I didn't really like how Fiyero's costume in Dancing Through Life fit him. It just didn't look like it fit him very well. And I wonder if that's because they needed to use stretchier material so that he can dance in it. But that Dancing for Life scene is done so incredibly well. And when I was researching for this video, I watched a breakdown of how they did that scene, and I need to link it down below because just incredible. But anyway, let me know what you think about Fiyero's costumes. And then the next costume in the exhibit was the outfit that Nessa is wearing when she shows up to Shiz University. So this costume features a blue blouse with a triangular shaped overlap at the center front. And I believe this might be a reference to the stage version, but I could be wrong there. I didn't notice this until the outfit was in front of me, but the blouse also features almost like leg of mutton sleeves similar to Elphaba. And the pattern on her skirt is almost like a futuristic plaid. It's kind of interesting. And then she's always wearing socks so people can see how beautiful she is right down to her feet. I really wish we got to see Nessa Rose's silver shoes, but that wasn't in this exhibit. I also wish we could see the outfit that Nessa wears at the Ozdust ballroom. It looks like knitwear, and I would just love to see all the details up close. Speaking of the Ozdust ballroom, we got to see Boq's costume in that scene. I can't remember if the jacket was actually shown in the scene. By the way, in the research for this video, I had to think about the entire movie from memory because I actually want to buy the physical DVD of the movie. So I didn't buy the digital version to reference for this video. And the physical one releases on February 4th, which I think is the day before this video comes out. But anyway, physical media is elite even if it takes longer. Anyway, I think that this suit is velvet. I'm not sure how the fabric was produced to get this stripy texture. Maybe it's a crushed velvet and they crushed it in a specific way, or maybe it's a silk velvet and they pressed and steamed it to get that pattern. I'm not sure. But there are also these triangular cutouts, which I love. Someone sewed those to be incredibly crisp, and I love it. One thing I was noticing about the exhibit is that a lot of the costumes, at least shown in this exhibit, are asymmetrical. And I'm pretty sure Susan Hilferty, the award-winning costume designer for the stage production, intentionally designed her costumes to be asymmetrical. And I'm not sure if Paul Tazewell had the same approach and just a lot of the costumes happen to be asymmetrical, but this costume is also asymmetrical in the way that the triangular cutouts overlap in the center front. And then Boq's bow has, I think, this jacquard spiral pattern woven into the bow itself, and it's kind of similar to the Shiz vests. I actually want to go back to the Shiz vest at the end of this video, but I really want to talk about Elphaba's costume first. So Susan Hilferty designed Elphaba's costumes to be of the earth and Glinda's of the sky, and I don't think that Paul Tazewell had the same inspiration for Glinda, but he definitely had the same inspiration for Elphaba. This dress is absolutely gorgeous. So it's a bunch of micro-pleated chiffon to kind of resemble the texture of the underside of a mushroom. So to produce this fabric, they laid some chiffon onto a base that has all the undulation and folds basically, and they kind of stamped that into place. And I think you need to use chemicals to make the pleats stay in place. So this is probably a polyester chiffon. I think you could kind of get this look with silk, but I think it'd be, number one, way more expensive, but number two, I think it wouldn't hold that micro pleat as well. So I'm pretty sure this is a synthetic fiber. And the cape is a crushed velvet, but the crushed pattern is almost like a bark-like pattern in the fabric. And it's just crazy to me how much detail went into the cape when most of what we see of the cape, I believe, is CGI. And this is such a small detail, but I really love how they added this seam or this dart right here next to her arm to make sure that the cape really shaped around her well. And then the hat, I just love the hat so much. Paul Tazewell says in interviews that this is silk chiffon pleated onto a buckram base. I think that they did a lovely job with updating the iconic witch hat, but also not going too off the wall so that it becomes unrecognizable. I really appreciate what Paul Tazewell and Nessa Arrival brought to the character of Elphaba. I've only seen the slime tutorials of the stage show, but the impression that I got of Elphaba in the stage production is that before she meets Glinda, she's not very stylish all on her own, but I love that the movie version of Elphaba really has a point of view when it comes to fashion, and she knows what she likes. So she doesn't just accept the gift of the hat from Glinda because she sees Glinda as a cool, fashionable girl. She sees the hat as something that would fit into her own personal style. And that extra layer of context makes the Ozdust ballroom scene even more painful. Since I'm already here talking about Wicked, I also wanted to give an extra shout out to my favorite costume in the movie, which is the costume from the salon in Emerald City. I absolutely love this spiral design in the skirt, and I think this is my favorite costume in the movie because it's just so creative. And this kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about how so many design concepts get repeated, and through that repetition you find something new every time. So I just love that skirt. And side note, look at all the costumes that they had made for the background characters at Emerald City. Just incredible. And actually, yeah, I was gonna go back to the Shiz vests. This is the one costume choice that I kind of disliked in the movie. This might be because I've taken up knitting, and so I've kind of become a knitwear snob, but also, I feel like knitwear can become so iconic. Like the knitwear in a movie like Coraline is so incredible, and maybe Coraline is setting the bar too high because that designer actually handmade all those sweaters. But even in a TV show like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, I just love all the knitwear in that show. I just feel like knitwear just gives a cozy, like rich feeling, and these vests actually gave H&M in the worst way possible. I really did not like them. Everyone really loved those Shiz University sweatshirts that some of the cast members were wearing, and I get that that's a little too modern to fit in the Aussian world, but I just really feel like the vest could have been an iconic thing that people who like knitting like me would be excited to knit up. But I don't think I would knit this pattern. Let me know in the comments down below what costumes you loved and even what costumes you disliked in the movie. I love comments. They're my favorite thing about YouTube, so please let me know. And yeah, that's all for today's video. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!